Welcome into the Spotrac podcast presented by Bettor Edge. Bettor Edge offers prices on the games that you're already betting on. Daily contests, weekly competitions. It's baseball season, Final Four action, NBA playoffs coming up. Great time to get involved. Bettor Edge doesn't work like your traditional sports book. This is the premier social betting marketplace. You can set your own prices, bet with your friends, and avoid that hold that sports books bake into all of their lines. It's the smart financial thing to do. Sign up for the first time. You get $20 on the house. Just use the promo code Spotrac at sign up. That's bettoredge.com. I'm your host today, Brandon Kravitz, along with the money man, Mike Ginnitti, and I am pulling away on our head-to-head wagers. Now 5-3 after last week's win for my Baltimore Orioles.
It's all right. I'll float you a couple weeks, and we'll make a big comeback when it matters, right? I'm not a regular season bettor. I make it happen when it's most necessary. So we'll get there.
All right,
Brandon,
the bounce back is coming.
Let me go on a quick soapbox here, if you don't mind, because we're in a little bit of a hectic mode here at Spotrac, and I want to just make sure we get this out there. So the free agent chaos has settled quite a bit in the NFL. We are seeing some NFL extensions come in, but for the most part, teams, front offices are in preparation mode for this draft, right? So that's not only, scouring ESPN's mock drafts and trying to understand what the hell that means. It's a lot of financial minutia, and with that comes a lot of ticky-tack changes. So you're going to see numbers change quite a bit, whether it's incentives that are getting converted to likelies or not likelies. We're seeing still a lot of cap conversions, just even small or big. And we're seeing some actual renegotiations happen that aren't exactly being reported. So it's the time of year where I'm doing a lot of behind the scenes work and making changes, and I'm not necessarily going to make it top of the line news. But if your team's cap number is changing, that's why. There's a ton of small ticky-tack things happening behind the scenes, even to some of the biggest contracts in the league. And it's kind of a fire alarm finish to get to the draft so that everybody is cap-wise in a good spot, but also ready for a long offseason of, like I said, big-time extensions, one of which, by the way, could be Lamar Jackson, one none of us saw coming, but the Ravens have been pretty forthcoming about at least sweetening his pot a little bit going forward here in the next couple of months. So lots of changes coming, a lot of them that won't be headline news, but will impact your team's top 51 cap space over the next couple of weeks.
And this Lamar Jackson news that we've seen come down, that's all part of it. This is just, is it about satisfying Lamar? Because it felt like he just signed a new contract, or are they just trying to make dollars more work as they get into draft season?
That one's a little surprising to me because it was such a contentious, right, leveraged situation for Lamar. He did it himself. Remember, no agent. There was the tag situation. There was the trade conversation. Obviously, Atlanta and those teams were somewhat involved in leveraging this entire situation. And I thought Lamar did excellent with a full 4-year guarantee on this contract. But, times are changing in the blink of a finger here. So, you see what happens even with Mahomes last year, who got basically a nice 4-year pay bump. And Josh Allen got exactly that over the next 4 seasons with his extension, his renegotiation in Buffalo. And I guess if you're just trying to keep this tier 1 not only satisfied, but properly compensated so that you don't have to have difficult, high leverage conversations in 18 months, then I guess this makes sense for Baltimore. But they do have other mouths to feed. I mean, they've got a center to sign, a safety to sign, and those won't be small contracts. So I'd be shocked if they did something serious with Lamar Jackson. But if it looks like what Mahomes got last year, where we're just going to drag 25 or 30 million up into the next couple of seasons so that we can quiet any conversations over the next 2 off seasons, that makes a ton of sense to me. But then, the cat's going to be out of the bag in 2027 when God knows how big these contracts are about to get.
Do you notice around this time right now, and maybe this is an every year thing, a lot of these teams start to do the same thing as they prepare themselves for the draft and this portion of the offseason?
Meaning they're all aligned or they're copying each other? Which way are you going with that?
A little bit of both, and I'll give you the context behind it, because I have spent the last couple of days down in West Palm Beach just kind of observing the the situation with the NFL annual meetings. I was doing my afternoon show down there the last couple of days, just got back yesterday. It is a wild event, but every owner, every general manager, every coach is converged in the same place. And I wonder if we know that these people talk to each other at this event more so than at any other time in the year. And I wonder if there turns into some, hey, let's see what this team is doing and get some ideas and then tinker on our end. And it would make sense if this time of year, if these teams all started to do the same thing to get themselves where they need to be, because they're all sitting around a fancy bar sipping bourbon together.
Yeah, I think there's some of that, right? That I'm not sure how much semantical business sense gets talked about, right? But if there's some low-hanging fruit within these organizations, this is where it gets discussed. There's no question about it. This sort of acts like baseball's winter meetings, which actually precedes free agency, right? Which is, let's get everything out right now. Who's on the block? Who's going to get extended? What do I have to worry about positionally with where these contracts are going? So to that degree, that may be exactly why the Lamar conversation is being had right now, right? And a takeaway from these meetings where, the Brock Purdy number maybe got floated around a little bit, and some of this other smaller stuff, right? Obviously, the Micah Parsons conversation is driving the day, and Jerry is not backing down from it. We'll get to that. But yeah, to me, those are the kind of things that happen. It's what are the big headlines over the next 6 weeks, not just with the draft and where things are headed, but from a roster construction standpoint, what's still left to be done? And by the way, who's still on the trade block? Who's trending towards the trade block based on how the draft unfolds? There's some of that, right? Cousins, maybe Tyreek Hill, to name a couple. Those conversations are absolutely happening. It's almost like a second free agency moratorium where these guys can bump some elbows, have some debriefing conversations about how March went, but also what's still left to do. And I do think there's some alignment with that, and it's completely legal and makes for a fun June when we get down to it, right?
For sure. And then the reporting side of it is incredible. I'm just a fly in the wall at these things. I'm not Adam Schefter. I'm not Ian Rappaport, but those guys are down there. And everywhere you turn, one of these NFL reporters that you've seen on TV for years is talking to some coach or some general manager. There's a lot of media availability on an official basis, but there are way more conversations that are being had on an unofficial basis. And it's no surprise that so much news comes out of this event because there's a lot of casual conversations that are going on. And some of that stuff ends up falling on our plate on the media side.
Yeah, right. Because you've got to kind of figure out what's fact or fiction, what's going to become fact at some point in time. The good thing about, some of the reporters you're mentioning, the insider guys, the Peter Schrager's of the world, who I think do a really nice job of cutting through the fat, but also not releasing information until it's proper to do so and at a point where, we're not going to crush whatever has to happen before that information has to come out. That's what's happening right now. There's probably a lot of really juicy bullet points that are being withheld internally because of the off the record conversations. But boy, there will be some impact had. Maybe during the draft, maybe right before the draft. There may be a number one overall pick conversation being had right now that some of these guys and gals were being privy to. So it's a fun time of year for somebody like you, I think, to try to sift through the rumors and some of the unofficial tweets that get put out there a little bit because of this. And honestly, more times than not, a lot of those things end up coming to fruition because there's, like you're saying, there's information everywhere these days.
Yeah, there's a lot of information that's not being reported. I don't know what it is, but I'm telling you, these guys are sitting on info. This
you can make it up right now if you want. It'd be a fun pod.
I tried to rub shoulders with the right people. Gathered some information, nothing overly reportable. But let's talk about the NFL draft since we're talking NFL. And one of the things that we are hearing from one of those notable reporters, and Adam Schefter, is that Shedeur Sanders is increasingly looking like a guy that is not going to be a top 3 pick. Give me a team outside of the top 3 that you think could surprise us with a Shedeur Sanders pick, reading the financial tea leaves. And I mean, last year, the Michael Penix choice from Atlanta kind of throws a wrench into this prediction because it means that anything is possible. But based on the financial moves that have been made from the teams beyond the top three, who is still a possibility for Shedeur Sanders in that first round?
I'm not going to count the Raiders out. I know that they've been tied to him for a long time. I feel like Dion has sort of maybe accidentally alluded to the fact that that's been the team that he's been in touch with quite a bit here, and that would make a little bit of a sense. We don't have a Geno Smith extension. I don't think that's related, but it could be. It could be a situation where they're putting pause on that, on putting any future guarantees on Geno Smith, because there's a world where Shedeur just falls into their lap at pick 6 here. I don't think, based on what we're hearing, that Cleveland and the Giants at 2 and 3 are at least interested at those positions, right? Now, would they trade back to take Shedeur? Maybe that's what they're thinking here. That could be some numerical semantics from Adam Schefter, kind of honoring the Woj bombs that we've seen in the past, which is he's not a top 3 guy, but the Giants are going to move back to 6 to get him from the Raiders, right? So, but I think the Raiders have interest. The Jets should have interest because they are pumping up Justin Fields to be the next franchise quarterback, but there's just no merit to that. You know what I mean? Despite the 2-year guarantee, there's just no merit to having that mindset. So they should be interested in bringing in a rookie to at least compete for that position. And then the Saints at 9 probably make the most sense. They're tied to a couple of other players, Jackson Dart being the big one right now. So I think their belief is probably that Shedeur will not be available to them at 9. But if he's there, that's a landing spot. This is a team that desperately needs to flip the switch on the quarterback position. They would love to do it today, but the cap gymnastics of the past decade have forced them to not go that route. So those are the 3 teams I'm identifying. Could somebody come big swinging from into the teens or the 20s to make a move? I don't believe so. Would the biggest surprise be San Francisco at 11? Heck yeah, right? Somebody like that, just turning the page on their current situation. But other than that, I think that's probably who we're identifying for one of these top 3 quarterbacks, and I'm including Dart in that conversation because he's really sort of Bonix jumped up into this conversation late in the game here.
Yeah, I like the idea of Jackson Dart staying in that southeast region in New Orleans. That's a fun fit, and you nailed it with the 3 teams that should be involved after 3: the Raiders, the Jets, and the New Orleans Saints. The only other team that I would throw in there potentially is the Steelers, but they'd have to do too much maneuvering. I don't think Shedeur is going to fall quite that far. The other interesting thing with that is that I think a lot of people have a hard time envisioning Shedeur Sanders because of his own arrogance and his dad. Him falling into a spot and then being the backup quarterback. But
tough.
If you're not drafted by Cleveland, Pittsburgh, or New York, being the Giants, then that's exactly what's going to happen early on in his career. It'll be fascinating to watch.
It will be. It'll be a humbling moment. We'll see how he handles it. I think he's a pretty good kid. I really do. He's just been taught to be premierly confident with everything that he's done.
And promotional. I think from being self-promotional comes across as arrogance.
Of course. So, having to sit for a couple of months, and who are we kidding? And it might be 4 weeks. We know how this rookie stuff works, right? So, but just having to be sort of, the number 2 in line for a couple of months might not be the worst thing in the world, especially because I don't think anybody seriously believes he's a top candidate. He's a prime starting quarterback right now in this league. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm reading the wrong tea leaves, but I think there are good situations and there are better situations for him to land in right now. And Pittsburgh should be one of those options, Brandon, but are they willing to go up from 21 into the top 10 to get a player that might have question marks left and right here? I don't think that makes sense for them from a franchise standpoint.
Yeah, and they're not the franchise to do that either. Yeah. Classic line from Jerry Jones at the NFL annual meetings. This comment was about Micah Parsons and his contract situation.
I thought it was fake. I had to look into it.
Your comment on Twitter was hysterical. I don't view it as urgent at all. I'd rather pay more and get it right. You don't see that one every day.
Well, he's definitely not wrong. And by the way, he's not going to be wrong again, because once you say that out loud, more is now the limit. Micah Parsons might as well just go and open up a separate account, because there's no world now where he's not exponentially the highest non-paid quarterback in the history of football with this comment, right? And by the way, based on this, he should just wait as long as humanly possible. I'd probably not even sign a contract this offseason, make him franchise tag me, because that's even more in 2026, right? Based on the more that he has said out loud. I just can't believe some of the things that Jerry Jones says, and I get it. He's just shooting from the hip, left and right. He believes something. He is not afraid to tell us what he believes. And by the way, it's amazing. I mean, it's been great for a decade at least, but this is there's a real problem with this, and I'm going to stop the joking a little bit. And some of the really good people that I follow have done some nice work on this. Like 14 Dallas Cowboys players are represented by David Mulugeta of Athletes First, who is, for all intents and purposes, the Scott Boras right now of the NFL. He has the most clients, the most impactful clients. He did J.C. Horn and Derek Stingley Jr. contracts in about 8 hours back to back. He has every position pretty much accounted for, including a couple of quarterbacks. He's kind of the guy. And Jerry, not only has he been trying to dodge going through the agent to sign these contracts with, like I said, over a dozen Dallas Cowboys players, Diggs and the lot, but he said it out loud in the same interview. So in the same conversation where he said, I'm okay paying Mike a top dollar, I just want to make sure we get it all right, he also said, I'm working with Micah Parsons, and I'm not working with anybody else right now, to which Micah Parsons responded immediately, I have an agent, here's his information, right? Which is, I'm going through my agent to do this. You're not going to rip me away from my agent and try to negotiate with me directly. This was all part of this same interview. And this is getting really fun and contentious, because we've seen, like we talked about with Lamar in the intro here, we have seen some high profile people do contracts themselves. But Mike is clearly not one of those people who wants to do that right now, especially with this one. You know why? Because he wants to get it right. Okay. That's why he wants to go that route, because his agent very rarely misses. Okay. He maximizes, his structure is clean. He brings in very little fluff, so that when we get to, the back end of these deals, the team was almost forced to extend the player, like we're seeing with some of these high profile contracts these days. This is where it gets ugly, because we have an owner now on the record saying he's trying to dodge the agents. He is trying to get away from the representation. And there's only one way to take that, right? He's not, Jerry Jones isn't saving money by going that route. Right? If anything, Micah Parsons would be, and the 4% cap that comes with the agent fee, right? Jerry Jones is saying this because he wants to take advantage of his players. What other reason would it be? He doesn't want to have a relationship with David Mulugeta, one of the most high-profile, well-respected agents in the world. No, he wants to attack Micah Parsons directly and make sure that he gets certain things written in. And by the way, one of those things is he wants to sign him to a 12-year contract. Okay, he doesn't want a 4-year extension. He wants a 12-year contract, like he did with Tyron Smith and Ezekiel Elliott and all these players that kind of got sandbagged with long-term contracts in a cap that grows $30 million a year right now. He's looking for that angle, and he wants to coax the player into saying, oh, longer must be better. Look how much money the total value of this contract is. Well, the Mulugetas of the world will never let that happen. Never. So it's a dangerous water that he is trying to wade in right now. And I'm very happy that Parsons either has been educated or is himself educated to know that, A, I'm not going that route, and I'm going to tell the world that I'm not going that route for this reason. We've got to make sure, as high-profile players in this league, that we are getting the right contracts, not just the biggest contracts.
Does Jerry think that everybody else is stupid? What is?
I don't know.
Is anybody else doing this around the NFL? Trying to circumvent?
Yes. Oh, yes. Oh, absolutely. And I should have said that. There's no question, right, that every owner is trying to get a leg up. And by the way, talking directly to players probably worked for a long time. It doesn't work anymore. Micah Parsons, when you listen to his podcast, knows more about this stuff than most of the common NFL fans. Okay, he knows exactly what he's talking about. I mentioned Brett Rooker, the Athletics designated hitter, on last week's pod, and how enamored I am with how much he knows about pre-arbitration, arbitration valuations, and how it was built into his contract. And every time he sees an MLB extension talked about, how most people don't understand the segmentation of that. Well, we're in that conversation now with a lot of these players, and I can tell you right now, without naming too many names, I've had conversations either via DMs or phone calls with some of these players just on a consultation basis for guys who are looking to have questions answered, to understand just the semantics part of these contracts. There's a lot more being asked, being offered, and there's obviously a lot more education out there for this stuff. So the days of owners getting over on these guys should be long gone, and I'm really glad that the next massive contract in the NFL won't be taken advantage of.
By the way, nice little flex, taking consultation calls from pro athletes. That's awesome.
Yeah, I don't name names.
That's good. Did they cut you a fee or
No, I'm just happy to do it. I just want to educate the world. That's what we're about here.
Look at that. And this podcast is free too, so make sure you support our sponsor in Bettor Edge. Jackson Merrill has already signed an extension with the Padres just a couple of years into his MLB career. 9 years, $135 million. The deal doesn't kick in until 2026, and the contract will run until at least 2034. Your thoughts on the deal and the Padres' willingness to pay their young stars earlier than most?
Boy, this is a whole conversation. I'll try to make it short and sweet. There's been about a dozen really nice young MLB star contract extensions here. I tried to lay out at least simple summaries for each in a recent article on Spotrac.com right now. We have more to get to, though. With Merrill specifically, they offered him a contract that was in the 60s prior to him actually stepping on the field last year. They were going to make him an extended player without basically any years of service at 0-0. And he said, no, I'm going to bet on myself. And he was the runner-up for the MVP. And he probably should have been the Rookie of the Year. He probably should have been the National League Rookie of the Year based on what he did for that organization. So he's added about $70 million guaranteed in just that 1 year of service. Here's the problem. And I think he's going to be a great player. There is a world now where we have a good decade of these pre-arb extensions, okay, from, Scott Kingery and John Singleton and all of the White Sox, the Eloy Jimenez's of the world. There's a good sample size of 15 to 20 contracts, and they all kind of suck, right? None of them have really panned out. And you can say it's because these guys are 21 and 22 and they become drastically different players at 24. They just don't figure the game out, or the game figures them out, maybe is the better way to say it. But we don't have a great example. Even Tatis, you mentioned, as the Padres have a couple of collective contracts here. But Tatis has had PED suspensions. He's had massive slumps. There's been no extended winning with this organization, despite a really aggressive front office. But we just don't have a great example of a contract that's been signed in 1, 2, 3 years of service that has 6, 7 years later become unbelievable value for the team. You know what I mean? It just hasn't worked out that way. So in essence, they're bleeding money in doing this, even though Jackson Merrill at 135, I guarantee you every comment underneath the posts from the insiders was, holy cow, this is a $300 million player. What's he doing this so early? Well, I can tell you right now, he's guaranteeing himself $135 million because who the hell knows in 5 years? And that's been sort of the way it's gone. And I have a feeling that's how agents are now kind of communicating with these young players is, hey, if the number's good enough, we're probably going to have to take it, because there's just so much uncertainty with the next 6 years of your life, getting through team control, having to fight through arbitration every year, which is getting uglier and uglier, and then getting to a spot in free agency where hopefully you're one of the 3 players that is properly compensated by teams, because everybody else just kind of falls off a cliff right now in free agency. So it's a weird world to be living in, but it should be really good value for the team. I just don't have a great example of that being the case yet.
So just speaking on Fernando Tatis Jr., because this is the most high-profile version of what we're talking about. By the way, Wander Franco would be another example of this.
I'm going to leave that out for now for obvious reasons.
Yeah. Ronald Acuna Jr., does he fall into that bucket?
So he should be max value, except for he gets severely hurt every other season. So whatever.
I still think his contract, because I'm thinking about all these guys, if they were to hit the open market right now, what kind of contract would they get? Yeah. I think Ronald Acuna Jr. would still get top dollar. I'm not sure about these other names.
I guess it's fair, but we did a value calculation when he signed that contract, which was 2019, by the way. And it was hundreds of millions of dollars that he essentially had left on the table at that point in time. if I did that calculation today, I bet it'd be in the 40s. Truly. I think that his stock has fallen that much because of these injuries, because of the time missed. And yeah, he's team controlled at 17 million through 2028. So the number's great. You know, Jackson Merrill is going to be in the 28 to 30 million per year conversation when it's all said and done. But yeah, Acuna is probably the best example of bang for buck that we have, because it's probably still a positive outcome for Atlanta, but we just don't have, we don't have a perfect example of this is why you do it right here. We don't have that right now.
We also had the Diamondbacks shelling out some money. They have not been shy about spending their dollars. The most recent example being all-star second baseman Ketel Marte. And he's agreed to a 6-year, $116.5 million contract, which begins this season. It feels like new territory for the Diamondbacks. They've been a team kind of like the Padres for most of my life. These teams didn't spend money, and now all of a sudden, these have become some of the biggest spenders in baseball.
Yeah, they. I teased this last week with the baseball preview that I know we have to, glom all over the Dodgers. And by the way, they're 8-0, so I guess we're gonna, or 7-0, whatever they are. I think we're gonna have to cede to them being great. But Arizona,
they are 8-0 now. They with the Ohtani walk-off last night, exactly. And the Braves still haven't won a baseball game.
But Arizona looked and smelled really good to me coming out of this winter, and they are good, and they feel like they are good because they've made 4 significant contract extensions this offseason, right? Ketel Marte, the second baseman, Geraldo Perdomo, the young shortstop, to go with them. They've locked in the middle infield. The eventual closer, Justin Martinez, who I think will have that job before it's said and done. And then Brandon Pfaadt, one of the starting pitchers, the third starting pitcher to be properly compensated on this roster. So they're not being shy. They're telling us out loud that they really like at least a significant amount of core that they've been able to put together to go with Corbin Carroll and Jordan Lawler and all these other prospects who are still kind of growing up into the system. They're a force to be reckoned with. They really are. They could be, that 6-7 year version of the Houston Astros that we got a couple years back that eventually did get to the finish line in 2017 with the World Series. So I know the Dodgers are behemoths, and they're going to have to probably wild card themselves into the postseason every year. But this is not an accident. They're not just throwing baloney at the wall here, kind of like we talked about with San Diego. These are calculated, confident decisions from this Arizona Diamondbacks front office.
Being a wild card in Major League Baseball doesn't stop you from doing
nothing,
just about anything.
Nothing. No.
Let's get to our quick hits to wrap today's episode. I'm not sure that we mentioned this last week, but the NBA is seeing a rising cap next year. The projection set for 10% more. That'll bring them up beyond $154 million for the overall cap. This is pretty standard at this point for the NBA.
Yeah, 10% is the max. For a while there, they were kind of urging, guys like Keith Smith to be a little bit more tempered with the numbers in terms of where we projected things. They've stopped doing that. This is going to be a 10% increase through this TV deal, and then probably thereafter now that NBC's on board. So they're healthy, they're happy. They're going to max the cap out so that this player salary stuff, and by the way, the 50-50 share, of course, to the owners continues to rise accordingly. I would imagine that for the most part, that's an indefinite conversation until otherwise noted. And you can have the ratings conversation that you want, but the game itself, the in-game experience, the in-game revenue is as good as it's ever been, and that's why we're seeing these jumps.
One of the big stars from not so distant past, Carmelo Anthony, has been notified that he's been elected to the Naismith Basketball Hall of Fame class of 2025. Where would Melo rank in terms of total career earnings? I'm thinking he did pretty well for himself. He always seemed to maximize.
Did you look? Because I'm going to look right now. I don't know the answer.
I have not looked. I was like, Mike's going to know that off the top of his head.
Yeah, no that's just something I have just kind of baked into the cake here with all the things I have to do with 3 kids. But take a guess. Just tell me, where do you think he ranks from not a number standpoint, but where on the list? How far down the list all time is Carmelo Anthony's rankings?
I think he's top 10. I'll start there. Am I in the range?
You're not.
I'm not in the range.
Here's his number. His number is 262.5 career earnings.
That's not top 10. My God. I'm going to go, let's see, 16th.
That is the 29th highest paid player in the history of the NBA.
What?
Yeah. LeBron James, after this season, and he's obviously vested his salary this year, will be over $528 million earned on the court. So he has doubled Carmelo Anthony in his career. Kevin Durant, Steph Curry, Chris Paul over the 400 million mark. This money's no joke. It's really starting to catch up fast. And, if you just think about the Carmelo Anthony era, they were well compensated, but he didn't really benefactor from that massive jump, right? That happened when the Golden State Warriors became the Warriors. You got to remember, the reason they became the Warriors is because they had this massive cap balloon that in turn turned all the max contracts from a percentage standpoint into gigantic big numbers. That was what, 2017, 2017 around there, or maybe a little before that.
I think of Carmelo Anthony in that Chris Paul era.
Yeah,
I don't think of them as far removed from one another.
Yeah, well, they started together, but Chris Paul's outlasted him by a decade here.
So is everybody in the top 10 basically a current NBA player?
That's a good question. Only Garnett, number 9, is retired right now. But it's a bunch of active guys from Russell Westbrook and Dame Lillard. And Kawhi's knocking on that door at number 11 here. Yeah, Kobe Bryant just fell out of the top 10 this year. So it's just going to be the active guys just cashing in left and right. Now, if we put an inflation calculator on this, that might change slightly, but I'm going to throw back a quick question to you because I just learned this morning as well. So Carmelo's going into the Basketball Hall of Fame, which is great. Nice long NBA career, national championship at Syracuse. By the way, it's a Basketball Hall of Fame. Remember, it's not an NBA Hall of Fame.
Right.
He's getting his number retired by the Knicks. I don't know about that one. Is he?
Oh yeah, no. The jersey retirements are. Once Vince Carter got his jersey retired by the Nets, anything became possible. Okay. I saw Shaquille O'Neal got his jersey retired. I was in the building for it last year by the Orlando Magic. He played there 4 years.
I got to tell you, like, you want to put a statue up of Mark Burley, fine, right? In Chicago White Sox. Because that's just a statue, right? It's just, and that could be taken down at any point in time. But you're retiring a number from ever being used again in the Knicks organization. Is Carmelo Anthony seriously worth that? He's great. He's a polarizing, he's still involved with the Knicks. He's still on the sideline constantly. So I'm not trying to poke too many holes here. I guess I'm just trying to have a bigger conversation about how special it should be to take a number out of order, right? Within an organization forever. Nobody can wear that number. Because it's not about the Anthony. It's about the number for me. Like, put Anthony's name on a wall somewhere.
You threw something in there that I disagree with, that you're making it sound like, in your opinion, the number retirement is bigger than the statue. I think the statue is the top of the line.
Oh, it is. But like I said, you can knock a statue down tomorrow if something goes haywire. You know what I mean? Like, you're taking this number out of the Knicks organization for the rest of history. That's wild.
It's a little extreme. I don't have a problem with it. He's one of the most popular Knicks ever.
That's right. That's fair.
And that's what and that to me is what jersey retirements are more about than what you accomplished.
Yeah.
Jersey retirements are about how much did you just mean to the fan base. It seems like there's I think it's is it Nick Collison? Like there's a random player out there that recently had his jersey retired by a team that you would never even think of. That's not a player that in NBA lore would be good enough to have their jersey retired, but to that fan base, it makes sense. And I think for Melo, that applies to the Knicks. I'm seeing some head nods. Did I get the name right?
You nailed it. Yeah. OKC. I think he was like the first lottery pick for them, right? Ever. Is that right?
See, that's what I mean. He was definitely an OG Thunder, but I can't remember the history behind it.
Yeah, he played. Yeah, he was drafted by the Seattle Supersonics and then came over. So yeah, I get it. You know, there's not one reason to do anything, but I don't know. I loved him. I mean, look, Syracuse is right down the road from me. I was a huge fan in college, so I'm again not poking holes in him. I just think the process should be a little bit more difficult, right? A little bit more.
This podcast episode is going to be titled "Mike Ginnitti Shakes Fist at Sky." All right, let's wrap with our weekly wager presented by Bettor Edge. I am up by a couple of games here at this point, but a chance to dig back with a win tonight. We've got Major League Baseball. We've got NBA. You know, I feel like I've been kind of catching you off guard the last couple of weeks. So you go ahead and tee up a game for me, and I'll see if I want to catch on to the other side.
I mean, we got Warriors-Lakers tonight, right?
Okay, I'm glad that you went that route because it's exactly the game that I want to bet tonight.
Yeah, we got to do it. So I'll let you kind of tease me a line, and we'll see what happens here.
Okay, I like the LA Lakers -1. They have yet to lose to this Golden State Warriors team this year. This is the first time that we'll see Jimmy Butler on one side and Luka Doncic on the other. So these are new look teams compared to what they've been in the past, but the Lakers have had a couple of days off now to get ready for this one. LeBron always gets up for that Steph matchup. He's questionable tonight, but give me a break. He's playing. So I like the LA Lakers. Do you want to take the Golden State Warriors, who just had Steph drop 50 the other night?
I know. Does that mean he's cooked right now? Yeah, I'll take the Warriors. I like this Jimmy Butler situation, and I think the Lakers are going to coast to the finish line here. They don't really care about getting to that 2 seed. It's not that important to them. So I'm gonna stick with Golden State here and kind of take I think they need it a little bit more.
Go ahead and do what we do. Bet with your friends, bet with your coworkers. Use the promo code Spotrac at sign up at bettoredge.com for $20 upon your first arrival. And do us a favor, subscribe and rate the pod you're enjoying right now. And head on over to Spotrac.com for all of the latest in the sports contractual world. Good luck, Mike.
Go Steph.